All right, welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
This time, we're going full-on Hollywood, folks. We're talking Oscars, baby.
Oscar season.
And we've got some seriously juicy intel. Anonymous ballots from actual Academy voters.
Oh, wow. That's a rare glimpse behind the curtain.
Exactly. So we're not just talking predictions here. We're going to try to get inside the heads of these voters, see what they're really thinking, what's driving their decisions.
I love it. It's like a little bit of Oscar psychology.
Okay, so first off, the Academy keeps the official voter turnout super hush-hush.
Yeah, adds to the mystique, doesn't it?
But how unusual is that? Like, do other organizations with similar memberships do the same thing?
Well, typically in organizations with similar membership numbers, you see participation rates anywhere from like 30 to 70%.
Wow, that's a huge range.
Yeah, it really is. And it kind of makes you wonder just how engaged Academy members really are,
And then on top of that, you've got the whole ranked choice voting system for Best Picture.
Oh, yeah, that can really throw a wrench in things.
Big time. Because remember, a film doesn't need the most #1 votes to win.
Right. It's all about how those preferences kind of cascade down as as films get eliminated.
Like a domino effect.
Exactly. And the article specifically calls out The Brutalist as an example.
The Brutalist, okay.
Yeah, it seems like it's got a lot of passionate supporters out there, but maybe it's not always landing in everyone's top spot on the ballot.
So it could be a strong contender overall, but not necessarily a frontrunner.
Yeah, that's the sense I get.
Interesting. Okay, so the article also points to a possible showdown between Honora and Conclave.
Yeah, the big two, huh?
It sounds like Honora has that, broad appeal, especially with the actors branch, which, let's face it, they're a pretty powerful bunch.
Oh yeah, they definitely carry a lot of weight.
But then there's this whole other layer of intrigue, because the article throws out the possibility that no single film is going to dominate this year.
Oh, really? Spread the love kind of thing?
Yeah, like the award could be spread across multiple films. We might even see a situation where the Best Picture winner doesn't sweep the night.
Well, that is unusual. I mean, it happens, but we have seen, especially in recent years, a trend toward, a few frontrunners kind of sweeping most of the major categories.
Right, it becomes like the, makes air quotes, gesture expected thing.
Exactly. So a more fragmented awards landscape would definitely be a shift.
The shakeup for sure.
Okay.
Okay, let's talk upsets. Two names keep popping up on these ballots. Monica Barbaro and Isabella Rossellini, both for supporting actress. What's the buzz? What makes them potential spoilers?
Well, they're both showing up on a lot of ballots, and often alongside Honora and The Brutalist, which could suggest there's a voting bloc forming there.
Oh, like a mini alliance within the Academy?
Yeah, it's possible. But Barbaro's potential win is especially fascinating to me because, historically, actors who sweep those big precursor awards, Globe, Critics' Choice, SAG, BAFTA, they almost always go on to win the Oscar.
It's like the royal flush of awards season.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So for Barbaro to win, it would be a real outlier. I mean, Russell Crowe's the only one I can think of who's broken that streak recently.
Wow, so that would be a major, major upset.
Absolutely.
Now, the article also digs into some interesting observations about specific genres, particularly musicals. It points out that they can be a little polarizing.
Oh, yeah, musicals can definitely be divisive, especially for, those serious cinephiles.
Yeah, it's not just about liking music, is it?
Right. With a musical, it's about how well that music is integrated into the story. Does it feel organic? Does it distract from the narrative?
So some voters might see Wicked as more spectacle than substance.
It's a possibility.
And could that actually benefit a performance like Fernanda Torres in I'm Still Here, which is much more, grounded?
It's definitely possible. The article even includes this anecdote about a voter who hadn't even heard of I'm Still Here until it got nominated.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which really highlights the impact of those late viewings and, word of mouth in the lead up to the final voting.
So things can really shift in those last few weeks.
Oh yeah, momentum is a real thing.
And speaking of potential genre bias, The Substance with Demi Moore, that seems to be facing some headwinds too.
Yeah, horror, much like musicals, it can be a tough sell for certain voters.
So it's not just about the performance itself, it's also about the genre it's wrapped up in.
It can be, yeah. The article quotes a voter who's sticking with Carla Sofia Gascon for supporting actress, despite all the controversy surrounding The Substance.
Okay, so there's definitely a range of opinions out there. It's not a simple yes or no.
Exactly. It really shows you that these voters are individuals, they have their own tastes, their own preferences.
Absolutely. Okay, we got to talk about the big one. Best Actor. Timothée Chalamet versus Adrien Brody. Chalamet's SAG win was huge, a real shocker. But now the article suggests that some voters might be picking him because of Dune Part 2, not necessarily his performance in A Complete Unknown.
That's a really interesting point. How much does the anticipation for a future project influence our perception of an actor's current work, you know?
Hold on. Are you saying that some voters might be looking ahead to Dune Part 2 and letting that excitement kind of color their judgment of his performance in A Complete Unknown?
I mean, it's a valid concern.
I feel like that's a little unfair, isn't it? Should they be judging the performance that's right in front of them?
Well, yeah, ideally. But it speaks to the fact that Oscar voting, it's not always a clear-cut, purely objective decision. There are all these complex factors that come into play.
Okay, I guess that's fair. Speaking of unexpected contenders, Ralph Fiennes seems to be getting way more support than anyone anticipated.
Yeah, he's having a moment for sure.
What's driving that surge, do you think?
Well, he's a respected veteran of the industry. There's definitely a sense that he's overdue for recognition. And the article even mentions voters who thought he'd already won an Oscar.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah.
It's funny, but also kind of telling, isn't it? Shows you how much personal perceptions and assumptions can play a role, even in something that's supposed to be, as objective as Oscar voting.
Sure.
And then on that note, the article also highlights the high abstention rates in certain categories, particularly international and short films.
Yeah, that's concerning.
I feel like, why aren't those films getting the same level of attention?
Right, and it raises questions about representation, about access. Are voters just feeling overwhelmed by the sheer volume of content they're supposed to consume? Or are there deeper issues at play?
Something to ponder. But before we move on to actually looking at some of these anonymous ballots in detail, I think it's important to remind everyone that Oscar predicting is not a perfect science.
Oh, not at all.
These voters, they can, and they do, change their minds right up until the last minute.
Absolutely. All these trends and insights we're talking about, they're fascinating, but ultimately it comes down to the individual choices of almost 10,000 Academy members.
So before we really get into the nitty-gritty of these individual ballots, what's the big takeaway for you so far? What's standing out as we start to peel back the layers of this whole process?
What's striking me is just how much these ballots humanize the whole Oscar process,
How so?
Well, we tend to think of it as this grand, objective evaluation of cinematic excellence. Like there's this secret formula for determining the quote-unquote best picture. But what these ballots reveal are the personal tastes, the biases, even the knowledge gaps that inevitably influence those voting decisions.
You're right. It's not just some cold calculating process.
Not at all. And it really makes you question how much of this is truly about artistic merit versus subjective preference.
Right. Like, is it really about the best? Or is it more about what resonates with a particular group of people?
Exactly. And you know what reminds me of that? It's that voter who admitted to not even watching all the nominated films.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, right? Even these industry professionals, they have limited time, they have varying levels of engagement, just like the rest of us.
That's true. And it's a good reminder that even at the Oscars, there's a human element at play. These aren't robots making decisions, these are people.
Exactly. And then on the flip side, you have the voter who explicitly stated they watched everything, like they were almost making a point about their commitment to the process.
It's fascinating how different their approaches are.
It really is.
Yeah.
Okay, are you ready to dive into some of these anonymous ballots and see this in action?
I am so ready. Let's do it. Okay, so let's take a peek at some of these anonymous ballots.
All right, let's start with voter #6.
Voter number 6, all right.
They're championing films like The Substance and Emilia Perez.
Interesting. Those haven't exactly been dominating the awards buzz, have they?
Not really, no. And they've got The Substance right at the top of their Best Picture ballot, so clearly personal taste is a major factor here.
No kidding. It seems like they're going for something a little more, off the beaten path.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. And you know what else is interesting? They list Monica Barbaro for Supporting Actress and Coralie Farjate for Best Director.
Ooh, okay.
It kind of suggests a preference for bolder, maybe even provocative filmmaking.
So not afraid to go for the unexpected.
Exactly.
All right, voter #7.
This one's a whole different story. They're clearly a huge Wicked fan. Zoe Saldana, too. They voted for it in almost every category imaginable.
Wow, that's dedication.
Right. It's a great example of passionate fandom within the Academy. Just like any audience, some voters connect with certain films on a deeply personal level.
It's like that film just really struck a chord with them.
Exactly. It speaks to the power of film, to really evoke such strong emotions. But even though they're a diehard Wicked fan, they still have preferences for other films. Like, they ranked Niggle Boys second for adapted screenplay, and The Substance for both makeup and hairstyling and original screenplay.
So it's not just a blind allegiance to one film. They're still making distinctions.
Right, and that nuance is so important. It reinforces the idea that Oscar voting isn't just about picking a single favorite. It's about carefully considering the merits of each film and creating a ranking that reflects your overall assessment of the year in cinema.
It's like crafting your own personal top 10 list, but with a lot more pressure.
Exactly. Okay, voter #8.
Let's hear it.
This one raises a really interesting point about the influence of factors beyond the film itself. They specifically stated, quote, "It's about the movies. Nothing else should matter."
Okay, so trying to stay purely focused on the art.
Yeah, resisting the urge to consider external factors, like personal controversies or political statements. But it makes you wonder, can you really separate a film from its context?
That's a really good question. I mean, does the art exist in a vacuum?
Right, and their ballot actually reflects this internal struggle. They have Anora as their top choice, but they abstained from voting in the makeup and hairstyling category, which might be related to the controversy surrounding Emilia Perez.
Oh, interesting. So even though they're saying it's only be about the movies, there's still that awareness of the outside noise.
It's a subtle but telling detail. Even voters who are trying to prioritize the art, they might still be influenced by those external factors, maybe even subconsciously.
It's like they're trying to block it out, but it's still there in the background.
Exactly.
I'm starting to see a pattern here. With each ballot, we're not only getting a glimpse into individual taste, but also a broader perspective on the purpose of the Oscars themselves.
I think you're right. It's like we're getting these little philosophical snippets along with the rankings.
So is it even possible to have a truly objective evaluation of film?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? These anonymous ballots, they pull back the curtain on the human element of the Oscars. It's not just about the glitz and glam, you know. It's about a group of people wrestling with the complexities of art and trying to make sense of this vast world of cinema.
Okay, on to voter #9. What do they have for us?
This one seems to have a very specific definition of what makes a quote-unquote real movie.
Oh, really?
They said, and I quote, "Anora is the only film that's a real movie."
Wow. Okay, strong opinion.
Right. It really suggests a very particular set of criteria for judging cinematic worth, you know? And it highlights just how deeply personal those criteria can be.
Yeah, like they have a very clear vision of what they're looking for. But then they throw in this curveball about Ariana Grande being a delight.
Yeah, that caught my eye too.
So maybe they're not completely against musicals after all.
Maybe not. It's a good reminder that even the most opinionated voters can surprise us. But yeah, their ballot is a mix of the expected and the intriguing. Anora is their top pick across the board, with Dune, Part 2, and Wicked trailing behind. And they did go for Ariana Grande for supporting actress.
So even with a strong preference for a certain type of film, they can still find things to appreciate in other genres.
Absolutely.
It's like a reminder that every vote is this complex equation, balancing personal taste, genre preferences, and maybe even a little bit of star power.
It's all part of the mix.
All right, let's see what voter #10 has to say.
This voter seems to be grappling with the whole narrative surrounding the awards, you know.
Like expectations and predictions that are swirling around.
Exactly. They were torn between Monica Barbaro and Isabella Rossellini for supporting actress. Ultimately went with Barbaro, but acknowledged the appeal of Rossellini's nomination.
They're aware of the buzz, but still trying to make their own judgment. I like that.
Me too.
Yeah.
And they also expressed some confusion about Cynthia Erivo not being a lock for Best Actress.
Oh, wow. So even within the Academy, there are these assumptions and expectations that don't always match up with reality.
It's true. Their ballot is a fascinating mix, though. Anora is their top pick for Best Picture, but they went with Ralph Fiennes for Best Actor, which could be a major upset, and they chose The Brutalist for several categories, including cinematography and production design.
So they're clearly drawn to the film's visual style. Okay, so we've delved into these individual ballots, and I'm noticing some recurring themes. This tension between personal taste and a desire for objectivity, the influence of genre biases, the weight of narratives and expectations, it's a lot to unpack.
It really is. It's like we're piecing together a puzzle, you know? Each ballot gives us this little glimpse into the minds of these voters, and collectively they paint a really fascinating picture of the forces at play during Oscar season.
And it makes you think, are these voters really choosing the quote-unquote best films, or are they just reflecting the tastes and preferences of a very specific group of people at a particular moment in time?
That's a great question to consider.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Like
Yeah.
how we evaluate anything, whether it's art, music, even those big scientific discoveries. Is there even such a thing as objective judgment? Or is it always going to be like colored by our own individual perspectives and experiences and stuff?
You know, that's a question philosophers have been wrestling with for centuries, literally.
Yeah, Kowick.
And I think these Oscar ballots offer a really interesting microcosm of that whole debate.
I see that.
They show us that even when you have a group of, you know, quote unquote experts
Right.
trying to make informed decisions, there's always going to be this element of subjectivity baked in.
Yeah, you can't escape it.
You can't.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into, the minds of Oscar voters, what's the big takeaway here? What do we want our listeners kind of walking away thinking about?
I think the most important thing is to, approach the Oscars for all their glitz and glam with the understanding that they're a human endeavor.
Right, not some perfect system.
Exactly. They're not some infallible measure of artistic merit,
Right.
It's more about understanding that they reflect the tastes and the biases and even the blind spots of a specific group of people at a certain point in time.
Yeah, it's like a snapshot of the industry in a way.
It is.
So maybe as we head into Oscar night, we should all try to watch the ceremony with a more critical eye. Not just focusing on who wins and loses, but thinking about what those choices tell us about the state of the film industry, about the Academy's values and priorities, and maybe even about ourselves as viewers, what we gravitate towards.
Absolutely. Don't just be a passive observer, Engage with those choices.
Yeah.
Think about the films that are being celebrated, the ones that maybe are being overlooked, and what those decisions might reveal about the broader cultural landscape.
It's all connected.
It is.
And most importantly, I think, let's not forget that human element.
The human element.
These ballots, they've reminded us that even the most prestigious awards, they're shaped by individual passions, preferences, and even a little bit of, guesswork.
It's a good reminder that there's always more to the story than meets the eye,
Yeah.
Even in this world of algorithms and data analysis, the human touch, it's still a vital part of the equation.
It's what makes it all so interesting, right? All the unpredictability.
Exactly.
So as you're watching the Oscars this year, keep all these insights in mind, Remember that every vote, every award tells a story that goes way beyond the red carpet and the golden statues.
Oh, yeah.
It's a story about the power of art, the complexities of human judgment, and that enduring mystery of what makes a film truly great.
Beautifully said.
So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
And who knows, maybe after this deep dive, you'll start seeing those anonymous ballots popping up in your dreams.
I know I will. All right, see you next time, everyone.